The cub's cry shatters the stillness of the Kalahari night. It's a sound that doesn't belong, high-pitched, desperate, fading. In the silver moonlight, a tiny lion cub, no more than 6 weeks old, presses his trembling body against a cluster of thorn bushes. His golden fur is matted with dust and blood. Around him, the shadows move with purpose. 5 hyenas circle closer, their eyes gleaming, their infamous cackles cutting through the darkness like broken glass. The cub tries to roar, but what emerges is a pitiful squeak, a sound that speaks only of helplessness. He is alone. His mother is nowhere to be seen. His pride has vanished into the vast African night, and the hyenas know it. They smell weakness, smell fear, smell the easy meal that fate has delivered to them. But what none of them know, neither predator nor prey, is that salvation is already racing toward them through the darkness. 3 hours earlier, Dr. Sarah Khama sits in the cramped observation post of the Okavango Wildlife Preserve, nursing her 3rd cup of coffee and watching absolutely nothing happen. The night is quiet, too quiet for her liking. 20 years as a wildlife veterinarian have taught her that silence in the bush is rarely a gift. Through the thermal imaging scope, she scans the watering hole 100 meters out. A family of elephants had been there at dusk, but they've moved on. The predators should be emerging now, beginning their nocturnal hunt, but the landscape remains still. Sarah's radio crackles to life. "Base, this is Patrol 7. You there, Doc?" She recognizes the voice. James Moremi, one of the preserve's most experienced rangers. There's an edge to his tone that makes her sit up straighter. "Go ahead, James. Got something strange here. About 2 kilometers east of your position. Can you hear that?" Sarah moves to the open window, pressing the radio to her ear. At first, there's only the eternal hum of insects, the distant hoot of an eagle owl. Then she hears it, a sound that sends ice down her spine despite the warm night air. Hyenas. Multiple voices rising in that unsettling chorus that sounds almost like human laughter. But underneath, barely audible, something else. Something that sounds like, "Is that a cub?" she asks, her pulse quickening. "That's what we thought. But Doc, there's no pride in this sector. The marsh pride moved north 3 days ago following the wildebeest, and the river pride is 12 kilometers west. So what's a cub doing out here alone?" Sarah is already moving, grabbing her field medical kit from its hook, checking her tranquilizer pistol, pulling on her weathered boots. Her mind races through possibilities, none of them good. "I'm coming to you. Send me your coordinates. Doc, if there's a cub out there with hyenas closing in." "I know." She cuts the engine of her Land Rover to life, the rough diesel rumble filling the night. "We've got maybe minutes. Is anyone closer?" Marcus is 3 kilometers south, but his vehicle's down for repairs. "You're it." Sarah throws the Rover into gear, her headlights carving tunnels through the darkness. The preserve's dirt roads are treacherous at night, pocked with holes, washed out by the recent rains, barely visible even with high beams. She pushes the vehicle faster than is wise, her medical kit sliding across the passenger seat with each violent bounce. Through the open window, the sounds grow clearer. The hyena calls are increasing in frequency, excitement building in those eerie voices. They found something. They're closing in. The radio crackles again. "Doc, I'm at your 10 o'clock, about 400 meters. Kill your lights when you get close. Don't want to spook them into attacking." Sarah's jaw clenches. Hyenas are strategic, intelligent predators. If they've cornered a cub, they'll be watching for threats, ready to make a killing strike the moment they sense interference. The trick is to appear fast enough to deter them, but not so aggressive that they lash out in desperation. She cuts the lights, letting her eyes adjust to the moonlight. The landscape transforms into a ghostly tableau of silver and shadow. Acacia trees stand like skeletal sentinels. The grass ripples in the hot wind. And then she sees them. The hyenas form a loose semicircle around a dense patch of thorn bushes. Even from a distance, Sarah can see the tension in their shoulders, the forward lean of their bodies. They're preparing for something, waiting for something. She spots James's vehicle tucked behind a termite mound, engine off. He emerges as she approaches, a silhouette moving with careful precision. Sarah parks and steps out, her boots crunching on the dry earth. The temperature has dropped, but sweat still beads on her forehead. "There," James whispers, pointing. Sarah follows his gesture to the thorn bushes. In the gaps between branches, she catches a glimpse of tawny gold, small and low to the ground. The cub is pressed so deeply into the vegetation that the thorns must be piercing his skin, but he's chosen pain over the alternative. Smart, she thinks. Stay hidden. Stay alive. But even as the thought forms, one of the hyenas, a large female, probably the matriarch, takes a step forward. The others follow her lead. The circle tightens. "We need to move now," Sarah says, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "If they commit to the attack, it'll be over in seconds." James nods, his hand moving to the flare gun at his belt. "On your signal." Sarah takes a breath. In her 2 decades of wildlife medicine, she's faced charging elephants, territorial hippos, wounded buffalo. But there's something uniquely chilling about hyenas. The intelligence in their eyes, the coordination of their movements, the knowledge that they're not mindless killing machines, but sophisticated hunters with complex social structures and problem-solving abilities. She reaches into her kit, pulling out an air horn, primitive but effective. 3. She counts quietly. The lead hyena's nose twitches, sensing the cub's terror. 2. The cub whimpers, a sound so heartbreaking that Sarah feels it in her chest. 1. She presses the air horn. The blast shatters the night like a physical force, a sound so alien and aggressive that all 5 hyenas flinch backward. James fires the flare simultaneously, the projectile screaming overhead before exploding in a shower of red light. The effect is immediate. The hyenas scatter, their hunting formation breaking apart. But they don't run far, just 20, 30 meters out, regrouping, reassessing. The matriarch turns back, her eyes reflecting the dying flare light, calculating whether these new threats are worth abandoning the meal. "Move, Doc," James shouts. Sarah is already running, her medical kit bouncing against her hip. The thorn bushes loom before her, a fortress of natural barbed wire. She can see the cub now, huddled in the center, his eyes wide with terror, his small body shaking so violently that the branches around him tremble. "It's okay," she says softly, dropping to her knees despite the thorns catching at her clothes. "It's okay, little one. We're here to help." The cub hisses, a tiny, ineffective sound that would be comical in any other context. He tries to back deeper into the bushes, but there's nowhere left to go. Behind her, James fires another flare. The hyenas call out in frustration, their opportunities slipping away. Sarah extends her hand slowly, palm up, speaking in that low, steady voice she's perfected over years of working with frightened animals. "I know you're scared. I know this hurts. But we need to get you out of here. Right now." The cub's eyes lock with hers. Even in the darkness, she can see the fear, the exhaustion, the desperate confusion of a baby who doesn't understand why his world has collapsed into this nightmare. "Trust me," she whispers. And incredibly, impossibly, the cub stops retreating. Sarah's hands move with practiced precision despite the thorns shredding her sleeves. The cub watches her approach with eyes that seem far too old for his tiny face. Eyes that have already seen too much, survived too much. She can see now that he's smaller than she initially thought, perhaps only 5 weeks old, barely weaned. His ribs show beneath his matted fur. "James, how are we looking?" she calls softly without turning. They're holding at 30 meters. "But Doc, they're not leaving. They know what they had." Sarah knows it too. Hyenas are persistent. They'll wait for an opening, a moment of weakness. And if a vehicle breaks down, if someone makes a mistake, she pushes the thought away and focuses on the cub. Her fingers find purchase on a thick branch, carefully bending it back to widen the opening. The thorns bite into her palm, drawing blood, but she barely notices. Through the gap, she can see the full extent of the cub's injuries. His left hind leg is swollen, possibly sprained or broken. Long scratches run across his shoulders, claw marks, maybe from hyenas, maybe from his desperate scramble through the thorns. His breathing is rapid and shallow, the classic signs of shock setting in. "Hey there, warrior," she murmurs, easing closer. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" The cub's ears flatten against his skull, but he doesn't hiss again. Progress. Sarah pulls a small syringe from her kit, preloaded with a mild sedative. Just enough to calm him, not enough to knock him out completely. She needs him conscious enough to maintain his own body temperature and breathing, but relaxed enough to handle. "This is going to pinch for just a second," she says, knowing her tone matters more than her words. Animals can't understand language, but they read intent, emotion, the energy humans bring into a space. The injection is quick, expert. The cub flinches but doesn't cry out. Sarah withdraws the needle and sets it aside, then waits. 30 seconds. 45. The sedative works its way through his tiny system, and gradually, the violent trembling eases. His muscles loosen. His eyes, while still frightened, lose some of their panicked edge. "That's it," Sarah encourages. "Let me help you." She reaches in with both hands now, supporting his body from underneath. The cub is lighter than he should be, malnutrition adding another layer to his crisis. As she lifts him free of the thorns, he makes a small sound, not quite a cry, not quite a purr. Something in between, a sound of surrender, or perhaps relief. James appears at her shoulder, his rifle now visible, pointed toward the watching hyenas. "Got him! Got him!" Sarah cradles the cub against her chest, feeling his rapid heartbeat against her own. "But we're not out of this yet. Look," she nods toward the darkness beyond the hyenas. More eyes reflect in the moonlight. The clan is gathering, drawn by the commotion or perhaps summoned by calls beyond human hearing. What started as 5 has grown to 8, 9, 10. "Back to the vehicles," James says quietly. "Slow and steady. Don't run." They move in careful synchronization, Sarah protecting the cub with her body, James maintaining a barrier between them and the predators. The hyenas shift and pace, following parallel to their path, never quite approaching but never retreating. Their patience is legendary. They can follow prey for hours, waiting for exhaustion or injury to provide an opening. Sarah's Land Rover seems impossibly far away, though it's barely 50 meters. Each step feels weighted, pregnant with possibility. The cub remains still against her chest, his breathing slower now, the sedative doing its work. Halfway to the vehicle, the matriarch makes a decision. She breaks from the group, trotting forward with purpose. It's not an attack, not yet, more like a test, a probe to see how the humans will react. James doesn't fire. Smart. Shooting would scatter them temporarily, but escalate the aggression level. Instead, he fires another flare straight into the air. The explosion of light is closer this time, the heat more immediate. The matriarch stops, reconsidering. 10 more meters, document. Sarah's arms ache from holding the cub's limp weight steady. Her torn palms burn, but she keeps her pace measured, her breathing controlled. Animals can smell fear, sense desperation. She projects calm, projects authority, even as her heart hammers against her ribs. 5 meters from the rover, something changes in the atmosphere. Sarah feels it before she understands it, a shift in pressure, in sound, in the very texture of the night. The hyenas fall silent. As one, they turn their heads toward the eastern darkness, ears pricked forward. Even in their predatory focus, something has caught their attention. Something that makes the matriarch take 3 steps backward. "What the hell?" James mutters. And then Sarah hears it. A roar. Not the tentative vocalization of a young male or the warning of a disturbed female. This is the roar of a fully mature male lion, a sound that carries across kilometers, a declaration that vibrates in the chest and shakes the ground. It speaks of power, of territory, of a willingness to defend unto death. But that's impossible. The nearest pride males are half a day's territory away. The roar comes again, closer now. Sarah reaches her vehicle and pulls the door open one-handed, sliding the cub onto the passenger seat. He mews softly, his eyes half closed. "James, we need to go?" "Now." But James isn't moving. He's staring into the darkness, his expression caught between disbelief and wonder. "Doc, you need to see this." Against every instinct screaming at her to drive away, Sarah follows his gaze. A lion emerges from the shadows. He is massive, his mane full and dark, his body scarred from years of territorial battles. But what stops Sarah's breath isn't his size or his obvious power, it's his gait. He's limping, favoring his right front leg. As he moves into the moonlight, she sees the source, a wire snare embedded deep in the flesh above his paw, the kind poachers set for antelope, but which occasionally catches larger prey. The injury is severe, probably weeks old. The wire has cut so deeply that infection is inevitable. The flesh around it is swollen, discolored. This lion should be weak, should be dying. Instead, he's running toward them, toward the hyenas, toward the cub, toward something that matters more than his own agony. The hyenas recognize him. Several scatter immediately, disappearing into the bush. But the matriarch holds her ground, joined by two large males. They've seen his injury. They know he's compromised. That's the marsh pride male, James breathes. That's Moyo. He went missing 2 weeks ago. We thought he was dead. Sarah's mind races. Moyo. It means heart in Swahili. She knows this lion, has seen him from a distance during routine surveys. He's estimated to be 9 years old, in his prime despite the injury. The marsh pride is his territory, was his territory before they moved north. And this cub, understanding crashes over her like a physical wave. The cub's age, his location, the desperation of his situation. He was separated when the pride migrated. Left behind in the chaos of the move, too small to keep up, lost in the vast emptiness of the preserve. And Moyo came back for him. He came back for his son, Sarah whispers. The lion closes the distance between himself and the remaining hyenas. Despite his injury, despite the obvious pain each step must cause, he moves with lethal grace. When he roars again, the sound is so close, so powerful, that Sarah feels it in her bones. The hyenas break. Even the matriarch, calculating to the end, recognizes the equation has shifted. This isn't a cub they're facing anymore. It's a desperate father with nothing left to lose. They vanish into the darkness like smoke. Moyo stands in the sudden silence, his sides heaving, his injured leg barely touching the ground. The adrenaline that drove him here is fading, leaving only the reality of his wounds and exhaustion. He turns his great head toward Sarah's vehicle, toward the cub. Sarah's hand rests on the door handle, frozen. Every training manual, every safety protocol, every piece of wildlife management wisdom she's ever learned screams at her to get in the vehicle and drive away. A male lion, even an injured one, is one of the most dangerous animals on Earth. They've been known to kill humans with a single swipe. But Moyo doesn't charge. He doesn't threaten. He simply stands there, 30 meters away, his golden eyes fixed on the passenger seat where his cub lies sedated and safe. The moment stretches. Sarah can hear James breathing beside her, can feel the desert wind cooling the sweat on her face, can see the rise and fall of Moyo's chest as he recovers from his sprint. Then the lion does something that will haunt Sarah for the rest of her life. He sits. Despite the agony it must cause his injured leg, he lowers his haunches to the ground in a posture that speaks of trust, of supplication, of a plea that transcends species. His message is clear. I brought him to you. Now help him. Document. James's voice is shaking. In 23 years, I've never. Sarah can't speak. Her throat has closed with the weight of what she's witnessing. This lion, this apex predator, has overcome every instinct of self-preservation to save his cub. And now, with infection ravaging his body and strength fading, he's asking for help. Not for himself, but for his child. The cub stirs on the passenger seat, making a small sound. It's barely audible, but Moyo's ears swivel toward it immediately. His expression shifts. If a lion can show relief, this is it. Sarah makes a decision that will either save 2 lives or end her own. James, get your tranquilizer rifle. The heavy load. Doc, you can't be serious. We can't. We can. And we will. She turns to face him, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her veins. That lion is dying. Look at that leg. The infection has probably reached his bloodstream. He has days, maybe hours. And he used what might be his last reserve of strength to save this cub. Sarah, I'm not letting him die out here alone. Not after this. She gestures at the scene before them. The scattered hyenas, the rescued cub, the father who shouldn't be alive but is. Get the rifle. I'll prepare the surgical kit. James stares at her for a long moment, then nods slowly. If he wakes up before we're done, then we run. But we're going to try. As James retrieves the tranquilizer rifle from his vehicle, Sarah opens the back of her Rover, pulling out the larger medical supplies she'd hoped she wouldn't need tonight. Her hands are steady now, purpose replacing fear. She's performed field surgery on lions before, but never like this. Never on an animal who sought her out, who trusted her, who chose to believe. Moyo watches her preparations without moving, his eyes tracking her every motion. Intelligent, aware, waiting. James returns, the rifle loaded with enough sedative to drop a lion Moyo's size safely. At this range, I can make the shot clean. He'll be out in 3 minutes. Do it. The dart whispers through the night air, embedding in Moyo's shoulder. The lion flinches, but doesn't rise. He keeps his eyes on the Rover, on his cub, as the drug begins its work. His eyes grow heavy. His breathing deepens. But still he watches, making sure, needing to see that his son is truly safe. And then, finally, the great lion lowers himself to the earth. His eyes close. His chest rises and falls in the deep rhythm of unconsciousness. Sarah and James move immediately, their years of training taking over. They approach carefully, always watching for signs of incomplete sedation. But Moyo is fully under, his massive body relaxed despite the injuries. Up close, the damage is worse than Sarah feared. The wire snare has cut nearly to the bone, creating a wound that weeps pus and blood. The infection is advanced, the surrounding tissue hot to the touch. Without intervention, within days the sepsis will reach his heart and brain. Okay, Sarah says, pulling on surgical gloves. Let's save a father. The surgery begins under a sky full of stars and the harsh white beam of portable LED lamps. Sarah has converted the space beside her Land Rover into an operating theater, laying out instruments on a sterile cloth, positioning Moyo's unconscious body for optimal access to the wound. James holds the light steady while Sarah makes her first assessment. The wire snare is cruelly efficient. Designed to tighten when pulled, it's created a tourniquet effect that has both slowed bleeding and trapped infection. The wire has embedded so deeply that it's become part of the wound itself, integrated into scar tissue and swollen flesh. I need to remove the wire first, she mutters, selecting a pair of surgical cutters. But the tissue damage underneath. James, monitor his breathing. If it gets shallow, we'll need to adjust the sedation. Got it. Sarah takes a breath and begins. The wire is thick, meant for large game, and cutting it requires more force than she'd like. Each snip resonates through the quiet night. When the wire finally parts, releasing its vicious grip, a fresh flow of blood and pus emerges from the wound. Suction, she says, and James hands her a bulb syringe. She clears the wound, revealing the full extent of the damage. The flesh is necrotic in places, black and dead. She'll need to debride it, cut away the dead tissue to give healthy flesh a chance to heal. Her scalpel catches moonlight as she works, cutting with precision born of thousands of procedures. But never has the patient been quite like this. Never has the stakes felt quite so personal. In the vehicle beside them, the cub begins to wake from his sedation. His small sounds, confused mews and tiny growls, drift into the night. Sarah glances toward the passenger seat. Through the window, she can see the cub struggling to stand on shaky legs, searching for something, for someone. He's calling for his father, James observes quietly. Keep him contained. Last thing we need is him trying to get to Moyo while I'm working. But even as Sarah says it, something shifts in the surgery itself. Moyo's vital signs, which had been steady under sedation, begin to fluctuate. His heart rate increases. His breathing quickens. Doc, he's showing signs of arousal. The sedative might be wearing off faster than expected. Sarah's jaw tightens. They're barely halfway through the procedure. She's removed the wire and debrided the worst of the necrotic tissue, but she still needs to flush the wound, apply antibiotics, close what can be closed, and bandage the rest. All of it requires at least another 30 minutes. Give him another quarter dose. Just enough to keep him under. James loads the supplementary dart, administering it smoothly. Moyo's vitals stabilize, but Sarah knows they're on borrowed time. Large males metabolize tranquilizers unpredictably, especially when their systems are already compromised by infection. She works faster, flushing the wound with sterile saline, watching weeks of accumulated infection drain away. The healthy flesh underneath is raw but viable. This lion has been living with this agony for so long, hunting with it, defending territory with it, and finally running who knows how many kilometers to save his cub. "You're tougher than you have any right to be," she murmurs to her unconscious patient. The wind picks up, carrying with it the scent of distant rain. Sarah glances at the horizon and sees what she feared: clouds building, dark and heavy. A storm is coming, and out here, with no shelter and a patient who can't be moved, that means everything becomes infinitely more complicated. "We need to finish this before that storm hits," James says, following her gaze. "Working on it." Sarah applies antibiotic powder directly into the wound, then begins the delicate process of closing what can be closed. The skin around the injury has contracted from weeks of swelling and infection, making it difficult to bring the edges together. She uses dissolvable sutures, working in layers, creating a closure that will hold but still allow drainage as the healing continues. Thunder rumbles in the distance. The temperature drops another few degrees. Moyo's ear twitches, a sign that the sedation is lightening despite the supplementary dose. Sarah has maybe 15 minutes before he begins to wake, maybe 20 if she's lucky. "Almost there," she says, more to herself than to James. "Just need to bandage and administer the long-acting antibiotic." But nature has other plans. The wind shifts suddenly, becoming a gust that nearly tears the surgical cloth from the ground. The LED lamp sways on its stand, throwing wild shadows across the makeshift operating field. And in the distance, a curtain of rain becomes visible, advancing across the landscape like a living thing. "That's going to be on us in 5 minutes, James says, his voice tight with concern. Sarah's hands never stop moving. She wraps the leg in sterile gauze, then applies an outer layer of flexible bandaging that will protect the wound while allowing Moyo to walk. The material is designed for large animals, elastic enough to accommodate movement, but tight enough to provide support. The first raindrops strike her shoulders, fat, heavy drops that promise a deluge. "James, help me with the antibiotic injection." Together, they load a horse-sized syringe with broad-spectrum antibiotics, enough to flood Moyo's system and give his body the reinforcements it needs to fight the lingering infection. James finds a spot on the lion's haunch, away from the surgical site, and administers the injection. Moyo's leg kicks reflexively. He's definitely waking up. "We need to move. Now." They gather the instruments with controlled haste, throwing everything into Sarah's medical kit without bothering with organization. The rain intensifies, going from scattered drops to a steady pour in seconds. The LED lamp fizzles and dies, plunging them into darkness broken only by lightning flashes. "Get in the vehicles," Sarah shouts over the rising wind. But as she turns toward her rover, Moyo's eyes open. For a heartbeat, everything freezes. The lion's golden eyes, still clouded by sedation but conscious, find Sarah standing 3 meters away. His head lifts slightly from the ground. His nostrils flare, processing scents, trying to understand what has happened. Sarah doesn't move, doesn't breathe, just stands in the pouring rain, meeting the gaze of a creature that could end her life with a single motion. Moyo looks at his bandaged leg, then at Sarah, then at the rover where his cub cries out again, more insistent now, sensing his father's consciousness. The lion tries to stand. His injured leg, despite the surgery, can't support his full weight yet. He staggers, falls to one knee, tries again. The effort is heroic and heartbreaking. "Moyo, stay down," Sarah says softly, her voice barely audible over the storm. "You need to rest. You need to let your body heal." The lion's eyes focus on her face. In the lightning flashes, she sees recognition there, not of her specifically, but of what she's done. He looks again at his bandaged leg, at the absence of the wire that has tortured him, at the reduction in pain that must be evident even through the lingering sedation. And then he does something that defies every scientific understanding Sarah has of lion behavior. He bows his head, not in submission, not in weakness, but in acknowledgement, in thanks. The moment passes. Moyo gathers his strength and stands, all four legs now supporting him, though he still favors the injured one. He shakes his mane, sending rainwater flying, then begins limping toward the rover. Sarah's hand moves to the vehicle's side mirror, ready to jump into the driver's seat if he shows aggression. But Moyo's attention isn't on her. He approaches the passenger window, standing on his hind legs to peer inside at his cub. The cub sees him and explodes into excited mews, pawing at the window, trying desperately to reach his father. The glass between them is the only barrier, the only thing preventing reunion. Sarah finds herself moving without conscious decision. She circles around to the driver's side, opens the door, reaches across to crack the passenger window. "Doc, what are you doing?" James calls from his vehicle, his voice edged with panic. Something stupid or something right. I'm not sure which. She rolls the window down 6 inches, enough for scent and sound to pass freely, but not enough for the cub to jump out or Moyo to reach in. The effect is immediate. Moyo presses his nose to the gap, breathing in his cub's scent, making low vocalizations that are part growl, part purr, entirely paternal. The cub responds in kind, standing on shaky legs on the seat, trying to touch his father through the gap. The storm rages around them, but in this small space between window and world, a family reconnects. Sarah watches from the driver's seat, rain streaming down her face, her torn palms throbbing, her clothes soaked through. She's violating every protocol, taking risks that could cost her job, if not her life. And she's never been more certain of anything. After 5 minutes that feel like both seconds and hours, Moyo steps back from the vehicle. He looks at Sarah one more time, a look she'll spend years trying to interpret and never quite succeed, then turns and limps away into the storm. He doesn't go far, just 20 meters out, barely visible in the darkness and rain. There, he lowers himself to the ground, facing the rover, settling in to watch and wait and guard. "James," Sarah calls into her radio. "Yeah, Doc. Tell headquarters we're staying here tonight. We've got a cub who needs observation and a lion who isn't going anywhere. They're going to ask questions. Let them. I'll be here at dawn regardless." She looks at the cub in her passenger seat, now settling down again, exhausted by emotion and injury. Then she looks at the shadow in the darkness that is Moyo, a father who refused to abandon his son even when doing so would have been the logical choice, the survivable choice. The rain hammers on the rover's roof. The night deepens, and Sarah understands that she's witnessing something that will change how she sees not just lions, but the very nature of consciousness, love, and sacrifice in the animal kingdom. Dawn breaks slowly over the Kalahari, the storm having passed in the night, leaving the world washed clean and painted in shades of gold and amber. Sarah hasn't slept. She spent the hours monitoring the cub's vital signs, watching Moyo's silhouette through the windshield, and radiating updates to headquarters. The cub, she started calling him Tao, which means lion in Setswana, for lack of his real pride name, has stabilized overnight. His fever broke around 3 a.m. His breathing normalized. The sedative wore off fully, but he remained calm, seemingly comforted by his father's proximity even though a vehicle separates them. Sarah steps out of the rover as the sun clears the horizon, her joints stiff from sitting, her muscles aching from yesterday's ordeal. The air smells of wet earth and acacia blossoms, the desert's brief moment of softness before the heat returns. Moyo is still there, 20 meters out, lying in the exact spot where he settled last night. When Sarah emerges, his head lifts, his eyes tracking her movement. The bandage on his leg is stained but intact, doing its job. "Morning," Sarah says quietly, feeling slightly absurd talking to a wild lion, but unable to help herself. How's the leg? Moyo doesn't respond, of course. But when he stands, Sarah notices the difference immediately. He's putting more weight on the injured leg. The swelling has reduced overnight as the antibiotics begin their work. He's still limping, still compromised, but he's improved. Visibly, measurably improved. A vehicle approaches from the west, its engine sound carrying across the open land. Sarah recognizes it as headquarters' largest transport truck, the one they use for major animal relocations. James must have requested backup overnight. The truck stops 30 meters away, careful not to approach too close to Moyo. Dr. Marcus Johnson emerges, followed by two wildlife technicians Sarah knows well, Amy Chun and Kofi Osei. They've brought equipment, portable X-ray, additional medical supplies, a transport crate sized for a lion cub. Marcus approaches carefully, his eyes never leaving Moyo. James briefed me last night. Sarah, what you did was necessary, she cuts him off. And isn't finished. We need to make a decision about Tao and Moyo. Marcus glances at the cub visible through the rover's window, then back at the massive male lion watching them. The protocol is clear. Cub goes to rehabilitation. Male goes back to his territory, if he can survive the journey. That's not going to work, Sarah says flatly. Why not? Because they need each other. She gestures at Moyo. That lion is 9 years old with a severe injury. Without his pride, without support, he won't make it. But with his cub, with a reason to stay strong. She trails off, letting Marcus complete the thought. Marcus runs a hand over his face, exhaustion and ethics warring in his expression. He's older than Sarah by a decade, has been in this job longer, seen more animals die despite intervention. Sarah, we can't just let them reunite and walk away. The cub needs medical monitoring. The father needs continued antibiotic treatment. And they're in the middle of nowhere with no pride support. So we create a solution. Sarah's voice gains strength. We transport them both to the north enclosure. It's empty, secure, has water and shade. We monitor them there while they both heal. When Moyo's strong enough, when Tao's old enough, we reunite them with the marsh pride. That could take months. Then it takes months. Amy Chin speaks up from near the truck. Dr. Khama, I've been tracking the marsh pride's movement. They're holding position about 40 kilometers north. If the father and cub are both healthy, we could potentially reunite them within 6 to 8 weeks. Marcus studies Sarah's face, looking for something. Doubt, perhaps, or the recognition that she's letting emotion override procedure. He doesn't find it. You really think this will work? I think that lion came back for his son when every instinct should have told him to save himself. I think he trusted us enough to let us operate on him in the middle of the night during a storm. I think if we separate them now, we'll break something that doesn't need to be broken. A long silence follows, broken only by Tao's small vocalizations from inside the vehicle and the morning calls of birds celebrating the rain. Finally, Marcus nods. Okay, we do this your way. But the moment either of them shows signs of distress or deterioration, we separate them and go to standard protocol. Agreed. Agreed. The team moves into action with practiced efficiency. Amy and Kofi begin setting up the portable X-ray to assess Tao's leg injury properly. James coordinates with headquarters about preparing the north enclosure. Marcus retrieves additional medical supplies. And Sarah approaches Moyo. She walks slowly, hands visible, posture non-threatening. The lion watches her come, his body tense but not aggressive. When she's 10 meters away, she stops. We're going to help both of you, she says softly. But we need to move you. We need to get you somewhere safe. As if understanding, and perhaps on some level he does, Moyo rises to his feet. He takes 3 limping steps toward the rover, toward his cub, then stops and looks back at Sarah. The message is clear, where his son goes, he goes. Marcus, we're going to need to do this differently than standard transport, Sarah calls out. We can't separate them even temporarily. The stress could undo everything. Marcus considers, then nods. The truck has a divided compartment. We can keep visual contact between them through the grating, but maintain safety protocols. The next hour unfolds like a carefully choreographed dance. Amy completes the X-ray of Tao's leg, a hairline fracture of the femur, painful but treatable with rest and stabilization. She fits him with a tiny splint, wrapping it so carefully that the cub barely protests. Meanwhile, Sarah approaches Moyo again, this time with a syringe of mild sedative. Not enough to knock him unconscious. They learned that lesson last night, but enough to keep him calm during transport. Last time, I promise, she murmurs as she administers the injection from a safe distance using a pole syringe. Then you and Tao can be together. The sedative takes effect gradually. Moyo's movements become slower, more deliberate. His eyes remain open but lose their sharp edge. When James and Kofi guide the transport truck closer, backing it up to create a loading ramp, Moyo doesn't flee. He watches as they load Tao first, placing the cub in the smaller, cushioned compartment. The moment Tao is inside, crying out in confusion and fear, Moyo moves. Despite the sedative, despite his injury, he limps toward the truck with purpose. Don't force him, Sarah warns as Kofi reaches for the hurting poles. Let him choose. And choose he does. Moyo walks up the ramp under his own power, moving into the larger compartment adjacent to his son. Through the grating that separates them, father and son press their faces close, breathing each other's scent, making low vocalizations of comfort and recognition. Sarah secures the compartment doors, her hands trembling slightly with the magnitude of what they're attempting. In her 20 years, she's never transported a father and cub this way, never preserved a family unit through intervention. The journey to the north enclosure takes 90 minutes over rough roads. Sarah rides in the back of the truck, monitoring both lions through observation windows. Moyo remains calm throughout, his attention fixed on Tao. When the cub whimpers, the father makes reassuring sounds. When Tao settles, Moyo relaxes. They're in sync, Sarah realizes. Despite the separation, despite the trauma, their bond hasn't just survived, it's strengthened. The north enclosure sprawls across 5 acres of natural habitat. Acacia trees, rocky outcrops, a permanent water source fed by underground springs. It's designed for temporary housing of lions during territory disputes or medical recovery. Right now, it's empty except for a few impala that scatter as the truck approaches. The team has worked ahead of them. Marcus and James have already set up a shelter structure, a covered area with soft substrate where both lions can rest. They've stocked the enclosure with food and ensured the perimeter is secure. Okay, Marcus says as they gather at the truck's rear. Sarah, you've gotten us this far. How do you want to do the release? Sarah studies the enclosure, thinking through scenarios. We open both compartments simultaneously. Let them exit on their own terms. If Moyo charges, we have tranquilizers ready. But I don't think he will. You're betting your life on that. No, I'm betting on what I saw last night. That lion understands we're trying to help. They position the truck so the ramps extend directly into the enclosure. Sarah mans the release mechanism while the others spread out at safe distances, tranquilizer rifles ready but lowered. On 3, Sarah says. 1, 2, 3. She pulls the levers. Both compartment doors swing open. For a moment, nothing happens. Then Tao emerges first, hobbling on 3 legs, his splinted limb held carefully. He mews loudly, disoriented by the new environment. Moyo explodes from his compartment, not in attack, but in protective urgency. He's at his cub's side in 3 limping strides, nuzzling him, checking him over with the thoroughness of any worried parent. The team watches in collective silence as the reunion unfolds. Moyo circles Tao once, twice, scenting him, confirming he's truly there and truly safe. Then he gently takes the cub by the scruff, the universal feline carry, and begins walking toward the shelter structure. Tao dangles contentedly, his little paws swinging, completely trusting in his father's grip. It's a sight so tender, so fundamentally right, that Sarah feels her throat close with emotion. They reach the shelter, and Moyo sets Tao down carefully in the soft sand. The cub immediately crawls against his father's massive body, curling into the warmth and security he's been denied for days. Moyo wraps himself around his son, creating a fortress of muscle and mane. Did we just witness that? Amy whispers, her camera still recording. We did. Sarah confirms, her voice rough. They retreat to the observation post at the enclosure's edge, giving the lions space while maintaining visual monitoring. Through binoculars, Sarah watches father and son settle into sleep, exhaustion finally claiming them both. The days that follow establish a routine unlike anything the preserve has seen. Sarah and her team monitor the enclosure around the clock, documenting every behavior, every meal, every sign of healing. Moyo's recovery is remarkable. With the wire removed and antibiotics flooding his system, the infection retreats. By day 3, he's putting full weight on the injured leg. By day 7, he's walking without limping. The bandages come off during week 2, revealing pink scar tissue but healthy flesh underneath. Tao's fracture heals with the resilience of youth. His splint comes off after 4 weeks, and within days he's climbing on his father, playing with Moyo's mane, practicing the tiny roars that will someday shake the savannah. But what strikes Sarah most is the relationship itself. Moyo demonstrates a patience and gentleness that contradicts every stereotype about male lions. He allows Tao to nurse from him, a biological impossibility that nonetheless provides comfort through the suckling motion. He shares every meal, tearing meat into cub-sized pieces. He grooms Tao meticulously, that rough tongue cleaning every inch of golden fur. And when Tao cries out in his sleep, nightmares, perhaps, of hyena laughter and abandonment, Moyo is there immediately, rumbling reassurance until the cub settles. I've never seen anything like this, Marcus admits one evening as they watch the lions at sunset. Male lions are supposed to be distant, tolerant at best of their cubs. This is love, Sarah finishes simply. This is what it looks like when someone chooses connection over survival. By week 6, both lions are fully healed physically. Tao has grown noticeably, his legs lengthening, his paws expanding into the large paws he'll need to support an adult body. Moyo's mane has darkened, filled in where infection and stress had thinned it. They're ready for the next phase. James has been tracking the marsh pride consistently. The group has settled in a territory 35 kilometers north, thriving in the post-rain abundance. There are 3 adult females, including Tao's mother, and 2 other young cubs. The pride is stable, successful, and according to all behavioral indicators, would accept Moyo and Tao back without conflict. We need to talk about reintroduction, Marcus says during a team meeting. The longer we wait, the harder it becomes. Tao is imprinting on humans through our presence. Moyo is becoming habituated to captivity. Sarah knows he's right, but the thought of releasing them fills her with anxiety. What if the pride has shifted dynamics? What if they reject Tao? Then we bring them back and reassess, Marcus says gently. But Sarah, we've done everything right. We've given them time to heal, maintained their bond, kept human interaction minimal. This is what success looks like, letting go. The reintroduction is scheduled for the following week, coordinated with the pride's movement patterns to maximize the chance of peaceful reunion. On the final day before release, Sarah enters the enclosure for the first time since that initial morning. She's avoided direct contact, maintained professional distance, let the lions be lions. But today, she needs to check Moyo's leg one last time, ensure the scar tissue is stable, confirm he's truly ready for the demands of wildlife. She approaches with Kofi as backup, carrying her medical kit. Moyo watches her come, and she sees recognition in his eyes. He remembers her. Remembers the night of surgery, the storm, the moment she rolled down that window. Last checkup, she says softly. Then you're free. To her amazement, Moyo stands and walks to her. He stops 3 meters away, then deliberately lifts his injured leg, extending it slightly, an offer, a cooperation. Sarah kneels in the sand, and Moyo comes closer, close enough that she can feel his breath on her face, smell the wild musk of him. She runs her hands over the scar, feeling for heat, swelling, any sign of weakness. She finds none. The tissue is strong, flexible. The leg is whole. You're perfect, she whispers. You're ready. Moyo holds her gaze for a long moment, and Sarah sees something in those golden eyes that will stay with her forever. Intelligence, yes. Awareness, certainly. but also something that looks remarkably like gratitude. Then he turns and walks back to Tao, who's been watching from the shelter, tail twitching with curiosity. Did that just happen? Kofi asks, his voice awed. It did. That night, Sarah doesn't sleep. She sits at the observation post, watching the lions rest under the stars, memorizing every detail. Tomorrow they leave. Tomorrow she returns them to the wild, where they belong, where they've always belonged. But tonight, just for tonight, she lets herself acknowledge the bond that's formed, the trust that crosses species, the connection that defies logic. Tao stirs in his sleep, and Moyo's paw immediately extends, pulling the cub closer. Protection, comfort, love in its most primal, most pure form. Sarah pulls out her journal, the one she's kept since her first day as a wildlife vet, and writes, "Today I learned that survival isn't always about the individual. Sometimes it's about who we choose to survive for." Moyo could have left Tao behind. Nature would have absolved him. But he came back. He risked everything for his son. And in doing so, he taught me that the line between human and animal emotion is far thinner than we pretend. Love is love. Sacrifice is sacrifice. And family is worth dying for. Or in this case, living for. She closes the journal as dawn begins to paint the eastern sky in shades of amber and gold. Tomorrow, the wild reclaims them. But tonight, they're safe. 3 months later, Sarah stands at the edge of the preserve's northern boundary, binoculars raised, scanning the acacia grove where the marsh pride has been sighted. Her heart pounds with an anticipation she hasn't felt since release day. The reintroduction had gone smoothly, almost eerily so. Moyo and Tao were transported to within 2 kilometers of the pride. The truck doors opened. Father and son emerged, stood for a moment in the tall grass, then walked toward their family without hesitation. The pride's reunion was filmed from a distance. Tao's mother had rushed forward, vocalizing frantically, checking her lost cub with frantic thoroughness. The other females surrounded them, scenting, grooming, welcoming. Moyo took his place at the pride's edge, resuming his role as protector and father. For 3 months, Sarah has tracked them through reports and occasional observation. The pride thrived. Tao grew strong. Moyo fully integrated back into wildlife. But Sarah hasn't seen them directly since that day. She's maintained distance, let them be wild, resisted the urge to check on them personally. Until today, Marcus called this morning with news. The marsh pride was moving south, responding to game migration. Their route would bring them within 5 kilometers of headquarters, the closest they'd been since release. Sarah couldn't resist. Through the binoculars, she spots movement. The pride emerges from the grove, 3 females, 5 cubs of various ages, and bringing up the rear, Moyo. He's magnificent. His mane has grown fuller, darker. His body shows the lean muscle of a lion who hunts and fights and survives. The scar on his leg is barely visible, just a thin line in the fur. And beside him, matching his stride, is Tao. The cub is a cub no longer. At 5 months old, he's gangly and awkward, all legs and oversized paws, but unmistakably healthy. He play attacks his father's mane, and Moyo tolerates it with the patience Sarah remembers, occasionally cuffing the youngster with a massive paw. They're a family. Complete. Whole. Wild. Sarah lowers the binoculars, satisfied. This is success. This is what all the risk, all the protocol breaking, all the sleepless nights were for. 2 lives saved. A bond preserved. A family reunited. She turns to walk back to her vehicle, ready to let them pass in peace. But then something happens that will become the story she tells for the rest of her career. Moyo stops walking. His head lifts, his nose testing the wind. He's caught a scent, Sarah's scent, carried on the afternoon breeze. The pride continues moving, but Moyo turns towards Sarah's position, 500 meters away across open grassland. There's no way he can see her clearly at this distance. No reason for him to investigate. But he begins walking toward her. "No," Sarah whispers to herself. "Go with your pride. You're free now." Moyo keeps coming, his gait steady and purposeful. Tao notices his father's deviation and follows, confused but loyal. Sarah's radio crackles. "Doc, what's happening?" James, monitoring from the observation tower. Why is the male approaching? I don't know, Sarah admits, her pulse racing. She should get in her vehicle. Should drive away. This is exactly what wildlife management training warns against, allowing wild animals to associate humans with positive experiences. But she stands frozen as Moyo closes the distance. 300 meters. 200. 100. At 50 meters, he stops. Father and son stand in the golden grass, the afternoon sun backlighting them in shades of amber and fire. Moyo sits, just as he did that night in the storm. The gesture of trust, of peace. And then Tao, young, curious, fearless Tao, runs forward. Tao, no. Sarah breathes, but the young lion doesn't stop. He covers the distance in bounding leaps, his teenage awkwardness making the run comical. He stops 5 meters from Sarah, breathing hard, tail swishing with excitement. This close, she can see how much he's grown, how much he's changed. But his eyes, those are the same eyes that looked at her through the car window, terrified and hopeful. Tao takes 3 more steps forward, and Sarah drops to one knee, making herself smaller, less threatening. The young lion approaches until he's close enough to touch. Then he does something that defies every behavioral norm Sarah knows. He head-butts her shoulder gently, the greeting lions give to pride members, to family. Sarah's hand moves of its own accord, running along Tao's mane, feeling the texture of wild fur, the heat of wildlife. You remember, she whispers. Tao makes a sound, half purr, half chuff, then turns and runs back to his father. Moyo stands, watching this exchange with those intelligent golden eyes. He doesn't approach further. Doesn't need to. His message was delivered through his son. We remember. We're grateful. We're whole. Father and son turn together and walk back toward their pride, disappearing into the acacia grove. Sarah remains kneeling in the grass, her hands still extended, her face wet with tears. She didn't know she was crying. Doc, James's voice on the radio. You okay? She presses the transmit button. Better than okay, James. I'm perfect. Sarah drives back to headquarters as the sun sets, painting the Kalahari in impossible shades of orange and purple. Her mind replays the moment over and over. Tao's greeting, Moyo's trust, the circle completed. In wildlife medicine, success is often measured in numbers. Animals treated, species preserved, population stabilized. But sometimes, Sarah thinks, success is measured in moments. In a father who refused to abandon his son. In a cub who remembers the kindness of strangers. In a bond that proved stronger than fear, stronger than instinct, stronger than the distance between human and animal. She thinks about that night 3 months ago, the storm, the surgery, the impossible decision to trust. She thinks about all the ways it could have gone wrong, all the reasons she should have followed protocol. And she thinks about Tao's head bump, that simple gesture that said, you were right to try. The marsh pride will thrive. Tao will grow into a powerful adult. Moyo will protect his family for years to come. And somewhere in the vast wilderness of the Kalahari, a father and son will remember the night humans chose compassion over convenience, love over logic. Sarah parks at headquarters as the last light fades. She sits for a moment, her hands on the steering wheel, her heart full. Tomorrow, there will be other emergencies, other animals in need. But tonight, she carries with her the knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, breaking the rules is exactly what's needed to preserve what matters most. Family, trust, hope, the things that make us human, and the things that prove we're not so different from the wild after all. The story of Moyo and Tao reminds us that compassion has no boundaries. Every day, wildlife around the world faces threats from poaching, habitat loss, and human conflict. But every day, dedicated people choose to help. Veterinarians, rangers, conservationists who put themselves between animals and extinction. If this story moved you, consider supporting wildlife conservation efforts in Africa and beyond. Donate to preserve habitats. Support anti-poaching initiatives. Educate others about the intelligence, emotion, and worth of the animals we share this planet with. Because every lion saved is a father who gets to protect his cub. Every acre protected is a place where families can thrive. Every person who chooses compassion changes the world. Moyo and Tao are free tonight because people chose to try. What will you choose? Subscribe to our channel for more incredible rescue stories. Share this video with someone who needs to believe in the power of compassion. And remember, in a world that can seem dark, kindness is the light that guides us home.